Shalom, shalom. Good morning, family. I'm feeling kind of feisty this morning, but at the same time, I'm really not. But I do have, again, another message. It's like a part two. And continuing on this concept of the standing up, I'm really seeing things, in my opinion, in very large, finally, archetypal allegories that the prophets were using. And because of the height, this is an important allegory. I feel like I have really, well, let me put it this way, in the context, I'm looking at my life, I will have been a Christian 40 years, technically, in starting of 2021. So I'm sort of a little retrospective, but I feel finally like I have been going around this mountain for 40 years. These concepts, these were like 40 years and going around this mountain. But finally, I feel like I am at the top of the mountain. I do feel like it is a progression. This goes with last week's Parsha about, Jacob wrestling with the angel and Jacob seeing this ladder, the angels going up and down. These are deep allegorical understandings, but most of them have to do on their highest level with what I will call one is the mentalities. In other words, in your mind, the deepest, this is called the oil, the wisdom. This is literally getting up to the level of, in the tree of life, of what I teach a lot is Bina. This word, wisdom, get chokhmah and get Bina. Get wisdom and get understanding. And I've been through this a lot, but this is, again, I have this little, in my mind, an allegory. It says that, if you want a president, when this thing is all settled, Bina needs to and will be and reign supreme as the president, so to speak, because it is wisdom that is finally going to reign supreme in all the earth. And this is a level of understanding. When we get on the same page as God, really, bottom line, because he doesn't change, Chokhmah and Bina have never changed. We come and go. We're like, that wind of doctrine that blows all around. But our foundation is this, and we are coming back to it again as our nation, because I see we're coming around this mountain again, and this is so prophetic. Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to say, this is all like so new and fresh to me again in a new way. It's like I've just come around a vista and I see it so much farther out, and it's so important. So I want to try to explain these archetypal things I'm seeing, but I've been reading Deuteronomy too. Now Deuteronomy is obviously, the book of Moshe, right? It is the book of the covenant of Sinai. It is the giving of the 10 commandments. It is Moshe in total retrospect telling the children of Israel, this is it, guys. This is the way it's going to be, for good or for bad, for blessing or for cursing, until you, quote unquote, get it right around the mountain, because he saw way down. And lo and behold, here we are. And it is absolutely time again. And I'm speaking to Ephraim especially, because that is my burden, because Ephraim, aka Christianity, you still have a lot of blind spots. Okay, it's easy for you to look at the Jews and see their blind spots, but you've got to see your own. Okay, and one of the biggest ones is like who you are. And this also was triggered because I was just on Facebook or looking at some Facebook posts, and a friend had posted something about how, America's not in the text in the last days. I mean, America's not there. And it leads to that whole thing like America's going to get blown up, like we got no part to play. And it's like, oh my gosh, take the blinders off, okay? So you can see we are totally in the text. We're Israel, totally. And so I just did a little quick two-liner to think back. But this is important. Yes, America is like a latter-day profane name for this part of the geographic world. Okay, fine. But biblically, God wasn't confused. He looked down on his earth and he saw us in this land. Israel still, as it says in I think it's in 2 Samuel 7:10, and it's where it's the clearest. The prophet Samuel is talking to David, and they're actually in a very high level prophetic parsing of the word together. It's really interesting. David and Samuel had a great relationship because David was a total Torah scholar, and here's Samuel, and Samuel is telling David, and they must be having a discussion about the seed line of Israel and going down through the ages, even past David, way down. And Samuel says, well, the Father, they're going to be in another place in the last days at the end. It's very important Hebrew word. In the Hebrew, you're only going to get it when you finally get down to that level. And it's a word of another place. He's going to give them another. Now, this is one, not the whole story, because you have to always keep in mind, well, Judah and Israel, where are they together in this thing? All right, because Israel, in one context, is talking about the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, but Israel, in other contexts, can always be talking about all 12 tribes, all Israel. So it's very important that you distinguish in context. All right. But back to this whole thing of Deuteronomy. So this is a timely book. This book is as real to us today as it was then. Because AKA Christian or Jew or righteous Gentile, if you are believe that the God of Israel, the storyline of Israel, Yahweh Elohim, the high God is your God, then we are, like in the same family here. We have to we've got to figure this out. This is Joseph revealing himself to his brothers, and his brothers like aghast at who he is and what's become of this whole storyline. So, but it's still an archetypal truth. All right. But I want to start in chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, because see, this is where we are. Ephraim has to, in my opinion, well, it's not my opinion. I'm just telling you what the prophet said. I'm telling you what Moshe says. So, I mean, my Bible says that the Father changes not and his prophets don't change. And if they're true prophets, their word will come to pass. And I think Moshe is pretty much, by everybody's standards, considered a true prophet. So it says in chapter 30, it says, and it shall come to pass when all these things shall have come upon thee. Who's the thee? He's talking to the people at Sinai, which is a very mixed multitude, which is a huge, important piece you have to always have then. And where we are today, and that offspring, that seed that has multiplied in all the earth. It's like huge. This is the seed of Abraham that is in every nation, tribe, every tongue and people on the planet. It's Joseph's coat of many colors. It is the children of Abraham, the seed, which is idiomatically the seed of Yahweh. These are God's children in all the earth. Okay. So it says, the blessing and the curse, and it shall come to pass when all these things shall have come upon thee, the blessing and the curse. When you always got to look back in history and see, which one was being played out in the generation. And it shall come to mind among all the nations wherein Adonai, let me just stick with kind of what would be the Hebrew words here. When the Lord shall have scattered thee, when Adonai shall have scattered thee, and shall return to the land thy God, and shalt return to the Lord thy God, Adonai thy Elohim, and shall hearken to his voice according to all things which I charge thee this day with all thy heart and with all thy soul, then. This has always been to every generation a conditional thing. But in our generation, in the last days, there will be, this is the whole point, there will be a harvest in the earth. This seed will be ripe and fruitful and be able to be picked, so to speak. And this is where we are now. The righteous in Israel, you understand, there is the wicked among us, and we have to distinguish. It's all about distinguishing and getting rid of the wicked among you, either in yourself or what you will tolerate in a civil body politic. Okay, what it comes down to, because the millennial reign is all about where everybody lives in complete safety and bliss and glory and longevity and health and strength, and there's no war, no sickness, no nothing. I mean, it is paradise, okay, on earth as it is in heaven. Well, how in the world are you going to bring that about? Well, the Father has always told us, basically, this covenant at Sinai will enable you to live like that in this elevated state, and you will be able to teach your wisdom, which is my wisdom, as the Father's saying, to the nations. Okay, but we just know the whole storyline with history. It's just been kind of like a mess. But here we are at the end of the age, and we are poised in a position where we can renew this covenant at Sinai. We can say yes and amen. The Lord God is our God, and his truth and his commandments reign at supreme, and are the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that's basically bottom line, very simple. And then we need to implement it. There's teeth to these commandments. We didn't make them up. They work. History proves it. Your own life, I'm sure, if you were honest and we knew how to examine our lives according to Torah, because these things are true and universal. So it's so interesting that one of the things, again, I know the evangelical mindset because I had it for 40 years. Really. It was starting to wean off of me 8 years ago. I mean, this whole process. So my awakening, so to speak, has been going on very gradually for about 8 years now. Anyone who's listened to me will understand this journey. But see, it's funny to me because I follow Pars, which is a parsing of the word of Elohim, the text, according to different levels, which is a very established Jewish exegesis. And I have been working my way from Peshat to the Remez, all the way down to the Sod. And I always would tell, well, I don't teach the halakha, which is the law, which is kind of, it's the drosh, if you understand what I'm talking about, that lingo. But all of a sudden, here I am dumped totally back into Deuteronomy, which is totally the law, but with all of the Sod understandings. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I totally get it. You can't have one without the other. Okay, Ephraim, you cannot have the God of Israel be your God, Yahweh Elohim, and in your understanding Jesus Christ. I mean, I understand this, but you can't have that and then not have the complete covenant of the 10 commandments. These are the rules, and this is the God. If you're going to be part of the king and his kingdom, a king has a right to establish the rules in his kingdom, and he extends it out to all those who will live under this. That's his sovereignty. Okay. So we have to really acknowledge it, because this is the sword of the Spirit, and this is what is going to give us our teeth back. Okay, this is why the Father doesn't change. He's not going to go enabling you and making you victorious, and right makes might, in this sense, if they're not his standards. Okay, if they're not his laws, his commandments, his Torah, his idea. Okay, that's what idolatry is. It's you make something else up that's not what he said, and it's like, he's like, well, no, I'm not going to back that up. All right. Now, this is a very long story, starting with Adam in the garden, so to speak, and he even goes way back before Adam. So interesting. But let's keep reading in Deuteronomy, because it's just, especially right now, because part of what it is the end times. What the Father's saying and through the prophets and all the judgments is he is sending fire. He's sending the sword of vengeance. He's sending this concept of strict and severe judgment, almost akin to like, and it will burn up everything in its wake. Now that's highly polemic. I mean, I don't think we have to worry about the world it's not going to go up in literal physical flames. Now, there might be bombs bursting in air. There's always a level. What has to be understood is there is a Peshat level always. There are always Yahoos out there who will cross the line and go into murder and war and bloodshed and every evil work like that. All right. The more powerful the righteous are in their generation, the more they can push it back, keep it in its place, and keep it from being like a fire that just does, quote unquote, devour the whole earth, like a World War I or II or III. I mean, the righteous have tremendous power, but your teeth comes from the commandments. What power? In other words, okay, you got power, but what are you using your power to enforce? We only have power when we're enforcing God's commandments. So this is why I'm really happy on that. I mean, I get it, and I will not back down. And it's the zealousness of the Maccabees right now. It was this whole time of Hanukkah. This is so incredibly true. I will, you know, and the whole thing of them trying to get the Maccabees to eat pork, or there's some of these stories where they're they're trying to get them to break the law, the other side. I don't care if it's demonic hordes or real actual physical people putting you, you know, what they did, they set them down and said, you either eat a piece of pork and before the people, and then they're like, all right, you're not going to do that. We go, but at least put it to your mouth, like pretend, like, so we, you know, and he's like, you don't get it. No. But again, we're at that place. We have to stand up and say no. Okay, honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise. There's so much in this, but the archetypal understanding of father and mother, you don't break that down. That is not optional. And this speaks right into this whole, and the LGBT lifestyle and agenda, you people are nuts. And you're not going to keep telling us, quote unquote, the good people who kind of get it, you know, that somehow it's okay. No, it's breaking the archetype. It's breaking the commandment in many different levels. So there's teeth in this. I mean, I didn't make it up. And I certainly didn't devise the whole human system, you know, of reproduction, where historically and genetically it takes a male and a female to make a new baby. I mean, you know, stuff isn't really rocket science. But anyways, these things, we have to get the teeth of the law back to us. This is what the Father's been waiting for Ephraim to stand up and get rid of its idols, get rid of this whole, you know, oh, we're not under the law. I'm like, what are you thinking? See, now as I see it, and I see this unbelievable twistedness. See, Leviathan twists things. He gets it all twisted and tangled. And then, you know, you really can't see the end from the beginning, because most people don't sit there and take the time to unravel something that's so friggin' confusing. It's taken me a lot of times, again, around this mountain to get to the top to see this. But in the meantime, yes, I mean, Judah's going to come to understand that, you know, Messiah ben Joseph was, you know, the good shepherd who came after the lost sheep of the house of Israel is a very real biblical phenomenon, the footsteps of Messiah. And it's okay. And it's there's going to be such a beautiful, and there is such a beautiful reunion happening all over the earth. There's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of questions to be answered, in my opinion. But what I do know is, let me just keep reading here. I mean, you know, Deuteronomy chapter 30, it says, but then he said, and then the Lord shall heal thine iniquities. He shall pity thee. He shall again gather thee from out of all the nations among which the Lord has scattered thee. If thy dispersion be from one end of heaven to the other, thence will the Lord thy God, Adonai Elohim, gather thee, and thence will the Lord thy God take thee. And the Lord thy God shall bring thee in from thence into the land which thy fathers have inherited. Listen, this is not talking geographically in the sense of, let me just say this again, another kind of, in my mind, correction. When the prophets are speaking the heavens and the earth, you know, even when you're talking about Egypt and Babylon, these are different words that are kind of coded according to the exact same system. Egypt refers to the physical body, to things that happen down here in the world, the carnality, Asiyah. This is the, you know, Babylon is more the emotional, it's the psychological. It really is the psychological warfare that comes at us, okay? We get physical warfare at us. Let me tell you, this is a personal note, how true this is. During this whole season of COVID, I've been fine and blessed, and I have felt very, you know, that plague will not come near my door. But the biblical plague, shingles did. Oh my gosh. It's so interesting. Everything's out of biblical proportions. Even I just spent the last month with shingles on the left side of my face and head. Oh my gosh. Can't even, unimaginable thing beforehand. And now I'm like, but the biblicalness of it, like a fire that just went through my face. I understand, again, even on a much more archetypal level, how these prophets use these words, a plague and a sickness, something that just comes and ravages your body. It's crazy. But the body is built to last. Technically, if you will give it what it needs and live the Torah command, you know, live a clean, even taking in the food commandments, people, there's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of truth in this stuff. Anyways, will heal itself. And it's amazing to me that literally my face, I've watched it, literally new cells. They say it takes about 7 to 14 days, just literally remake my face. It's incredible. That's why COVID does have a 99% survival rate. What are we doing? But those are whole other subjects. I got to get through this concept. But the nations, in Zechariah, which is the Parsha for today, one of them, 2:10 through 47, but it says, in the last days again. See, this is the point. Into the last days, how do I get it? 6,000 years. So even the sages break that down into 2,000, 2,000, and 2,000. The last 2 days is the last 2,000 years, which happens to be the last 2,000 years since Messiah, since Meshia. All right, the Meshia. But many nations shall join themselves to Yahweh Elohim, Yod He Vav He, to the name, the Tetragrammaton, and that's just more than confessing Jesus. All right, that is like high level. That's getting it on the level of wisdom and understanding. All right, that day, and they shall be my people. So they will join themselves to Yahweh in that day and shall be my people. Then I will dwell among the sons of Israel and be their Elohim. That's in another verse. And interesting is you have the word Yahweh and you have the word Elohim within 2 verses, but then you have Yahweh Elohim, the totality of the name. But this is something, so this is why I say it's to Judah, it's to Ephraim, and it is to the righteous Gentiles who are the lost sheep of the house of Israel in just as many ways as somebody who might be a little more lineaged, to trace it back per se. Because really the seed of Abraham, it really was like the father putting a chip or his DNA chip so that you would always ping no matter where you were in the world. He knew where you were. You pinged, he had you on his radar. It's quite electromagnetic on so many levels in a realness. That's what metaphysics is. It's a very real that totally parallels the physical, what happens in nature and the physical, but it's just as real. And it follows the exact same laws and principles. Torah doesn't change. The archetypes don't change. That's how you know that you're in truth. But anyways, it's important to understand that this Joseph's coat of many colors, that's why Revelation will talk about it. This seed is in all the earth, and this seed is responding, and the banner is being lifted among the nations. And make no mistake that the banner is the covenant. The banner represents, Yahweh and his commandments. This is our standard. This is our banner. This went into all the earth. It's so interesting. And I don't really have it at my fingertips, but they found a stone in, I believe, New Mexico, out west, southwest, I believe, that had a Decalogue on it. Decalogue is written out in Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, block letter type, really, the 10 Commandments. And they found it way over there in this desert land, so to speak. And it's unmistakable. Okay, it's there. Google it. Call it the Decalogue. And anyways, so what they have found historically, all right, so why is that thing there? Then they found it relates to, this is true, this is documented history. It's just the history, they won't put it in our textbooks per se, but the copper mines, it says that Solomon and David, they went all over the earth collecting ores and copper and all sorts of gold and so things for the temple and to continue to build the glory of their city, their nation. Oh, I know where my point was. I didn't make it. Anyways, but they went to the copper mines up in the Great Lakes area. And the archaeologists there, they find these ancient copper mines. So the fact that the Israelites were there, that the fleets of Solomon and David were worldwide trading and did leave. See, this is what they did leave artifacts. Okay, now they've left that out of your textbooks, but that's still out there. But what did they take with them? They took the Decalogue. They affirmed that their God and the 10 Commandments kind of go hand in hand. Okay, where we go, and these are the command. We will live with you by these commandments. Now, this is good news because this really gives everybody a level playing field. I mean, it's really actually quite a brilliant plan. But plans are plans, and then the history of it is actually sometimes very different. But it says, if you don't do this, the Lord thy God will put these curses upon thine. Well, all right, well, there's 2 things he's always telling you. If you don't obey me according to these commandments, you're going to get the curses, because that's just the way the system is wired for saint or sinner or whoever. Okay. It's electromagnetic, and you step over the line, and the thing is gonna zap you back. That's just the way it works. But he will have the curses fall on on our enemies. If we obey him, we will be in this protective shield. We will be living in a place where nothing's zapping us. Okay, because it can't reach. It has no. We're in an impenetrable place. This is always the promise of Torah. He will protect us, our rear guard, and he will be a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. I mean, there's so much beautiful allegory in that. But be that as it may, looking back. But now, because see, in the whole earth today, it's really getting really simple. It's not about Democrat or Republican. It's not about, even though these are issues, you have to pay attention to what these different groups espouse, or even communist, socialist. But it's the sons of God and the sons of darkness really aligning, squaring off. This is really, and I'll tell you what, it's going to get really weird. I keep saying this, and I called 2020 last year, January. I did a video. I started out, we're going into the decade of disclosure. And that's what's really swirling around, again, surfacing on a lot of these, kind of YouTube channels but the Space Force and this whole concept of Israel and America talking to aliens, and in a kind of, there's some really crazy stuff coming down. Can't make this stuff up. Anyways, but our only defense, we will be in the safest, sweetest spot. If we're on the side of the sword, if we're wielding the sword with the Father, you got to be out of the way of the sword. You got to either be behind it, you just don't want to be out there unprotected in front as it comes down, because Yahweh says vengeance is his. He's going to do it. And a lot of this, again, when you're thinking polemically, the only objective way to do this is the commandments. Now, again, let me interject this for those who have, you got the 10 commandments, the beginning of Deuteronomy, and the Father is, Moshe is with the Father. Mount Sinai, they had metaphysical phenomena in nature at the covenant of Sinai. I mean, there is big stuff that went on there. Okay, I don't have time to go into that. But this covenant, and even the breaking of the covenants, Moshe came down, and yes, the mixed multitude, they were like a mess again. See, it's taken a long time for the purification process. But I absolutely believe that there are souls on the earth today, the elect. This is the whole point. 144 represent a group of people who have finally purified their souls to the point where, you know what? We can do this. We can do this. And the Father, we will turn to the Father will turn to us, and then we will turn to our enemy. And then it's game over. This is all polemic, because if you don't get it on this level and try to make it some physical thing in the street, woe to you. Okay, that's why on so many levels. All right, there's just really too much here. But it says, now, if you will hearken to the voice of the Adonai, your Elohim, keep his commandments and his ordinance and his judgments written in the book of this law, if thou turn to the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul. See, it's just, and this is America now. This is why we have to, at this point, the righteous have to stand up. And this is happening. And it is turning out to be actually a political red wave. I mean, it's really interesting. The patriots today, like the Maccabees, over 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, were the same thing. There are people, you have to draw a line in the sand and say no more. You have trespassed on the commandments enough. Enough is enough. Okay, does that mean I'm perfect? Am I saying that I got it all together? No, none of this crap. I'm affirming that there is absolutely a standard outside of us that we can, and we did agree on, and that's the whole point. Our nation was founded by people on that covenant on those same terms, that we would be a righteous people and we would keep these covenants, and then those covenants would allow us to keep our covenants in our body politic. But if you don't, if you throw the baby out with the bathwater, anyways, this is why if you're going to take on the sons of, the sons of God and the sons of darkness, you got to have a sword. You better have some teeth. Okay. Otherwise you're just going to get run up. All right. But now we do have it. We have the opportunity. And this is where, we have a lot of learning, a lot of backpedaling. We were supposed to teach our children and their children, it hasn't quite happened as well as it, but we can get up to speed. And this is where a lot of the reunification of the whole house of Israel as Gentile Christian believers, or whatever you want to call it, go back and learn the wisdom in the house of Judah, in the Torah sages, in the halakha, okay, in the law. It is so delineated, fleshed out, understood, in binding and loosing and understanding. There is so much wisdom there. Okay, Judah, Ephraim, you did not... You have had teeth at times. You have kept the commandments. You have done a lot of great. Western civilization is built on a lot of this bedrock. But we, again, will not acknowledge that what we're grafted into is the root that Judah has stayed attached to all this time. This is a real anti-Semitism. I've said all these things forever and ever, and it doesn't matter. But, well, it does matter. Because these are all things in the coming together, because these sons of darkness that are coming at us at the end of the age, they have nothing to lose. They have absolutely nothing. They know their demise. But we better understand, we got a lot to lose if we don't gird ourselves, arm ourselves, cover ourselves, look to him who says. So anyways, there's there's so many ways it goes on in Deuteronomy 32, and he talks about, constantly, if you go whoring after the other gods, if you continue, this is like looking down all the way through history. So this is now looking down 4,000 years. It's about, into into this last generation, this last kind of planting of the Father, that seed, and how it's going to look in all the earth. You got to get to the top of the mountain, and there God's people will be in all the earth. And see, okay, this is my point. I didn't make this one point. I'm going to make it now. All right. You have to understand the prophets, but when they talk about the heavens and the earth is the body. The heavens are our psychological and spiritual levels. Basically, this is a very absolute ironclad layers to apply, to extract from the text. Okay. But when Judah has retained, and Judah will get, and the whole point, let me put it this way, the land over there in Israel, I have to say, is not the total of the inheritance. The people of Elohim are going to inherit, we're going to inherit the whole earth. So it really doesn't matter where you live in the earth today. You can stay right where you are in the millennium and rule and reign with the righteous king, with the righteous standard, and you can be make your land a righteous land. The whole earth is Lord's, and the fullness thereof. The Ephraim has carried this seed, and now righteous people are in all the earth. Okay, and as these righteous people unite and stand up together, all right, Judah conversely has been very attached to the land, this parcel the size of Rhode Island in the land, but because the city is there. See, Judah has more of at stake an inheritance in the city of our God. Jerusalem is the city. I absolutely believe when the Father comes, when the millennial comes and the King is here, literally, and there'll be a reigning on earth, the city is going to be Jerusalem. Make no mistake. And it's going to be the geographic Jerusalem over in the Middle East. But this is why, because of the fight, because of the migrations, because of everything in the last days, at the end of the age, that governmental seat of that is really part of all Israel's being what it is to be a firstborn. Right now, has moved over and has been planted in quote unquote another place. And it actually did migrate in England and then in America. But governmentally, this is why the whole world, I talk to people I have good friends in Australia and in Canada, and they'll tell me, they goes, we are looking at your election. And I'm like, what do you care so much about our election? You got, but they're saying we're watching it. You are the last hope. Because see, their governments are already really compromised and controlled. In Canada especially, they're going to have a real rough time in the big great reset, I think. Australia. And so they're looking at America. If America falls, the last bastion of freedom, I mean, it's, yeah, let's cut lights out. But even we can't let that happen. You've got to join with your brother Judah. We've got to affirm the covenant. We've got to get teeth now to for the whole world. The nations are waiting for us to arise and to stand up. This is all part of the standing up and to take on the birthright of the firstborn. Be who you are. Be a firstborn. Okay? There's privileges, but there is huge responsibility. And they have to, it's justice, and mercy and justice have got to come together in true justice for the world. That is the plan. But it talks about, you know, the firstborn, because what's happening, another thing, like I said, it's just kind of an interesting time. Besides having this plague on my face, I got this 40 years, you know, of kind of going around the mountain. I finally get Deuteronomy, and I have a life verse. Okay. It doesn't matter how the whole thing came about, but and I've talked to other people who feel this is something the Father does. I mean, obviously not with everybody. With some people, they feel there's a life verse or something wrapped in a verse that is sort of their destiny. And I have felt this way, and I came upon this verse in the very beginning of my walk 40 years ago, and it was a verse. It's Exodus. It's 4:22, and I read it and I just knew whatever, and it's grown with me. But I never knew what it meant. It's Exodus 4:2. And Moshe is told to tell Pharaoh that Yahweh says, this is what I said, you know, tell Pharaoh that Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And oh, great, Moshe, more power to you. And we know the story. I mean, finally, Pharaoh's like, okay, fine. You know, you win, your God wins. Israel is my son, even my firstborn. But about 8 years ago, what happened was it dawned on me, okay, well, sounds great, but I had no idea what it meant. What did that mean to me personally? I didn't know I was even Israel. You know, that's a Christian. I thought I was a Christian per se, all right? But through one day I asked the Father, okay, well, then teach me, who is Israel? What does Israel mean? And what does the firstborn mean? And then the rest of it has now finally, I get it now. And I get it as a firstborn. I mean, women, children, anybody who gets it and lives, it can be part of this quote unquote firstborn category. And this is what it's all about. And this is the standing up. And this is what we're upon. So I guess the point is the rights of the firstborn stem from his covenant. Okay, so Israel is, so who's Israel? Israel is not a, let me put it this way, you're never going to be able to look at the people in the world today and figure out if they're Israel or not, okay? Except to the extent where Yeshua said very clearly, you'll know them by their fruit. What is the fruit? The fruit is the commandments. As you put somebody's life up against it, do they, you know, are they lawless or are they righteous? I mean, that's kind of a good barometer, that is. Okay, but more to the point is Israel in the name, I think I said this last week, El is the word for God, Elohim, because E-L-L is the most root basic word we have for God. El, so Israel. Israel is the word, Yashar comes from to save, deliver, overcome. And this is why Israel is somebody who, bottom line, this is the point, who overcomes in this lifetime, in this world. They overcome what? They overcome, all right, and this is the story with Jacob, and when he wrestled with the angel, and when he overcame, it's the idea of the evil inclination. You have to choose with Joshua, choose you this day. You can't get, what are you going to serve? Okay. Now the point is, we're not talking about doing it perfectly, but you do have to affirm what is your rule of thumb, and you have to overcome and be part of the fight and fight the good fight and overcome. Hebraically, it's called the evil inclination, that part of us that is in us from, you know, Cain, from the whole get-go. It's very deeply encoded, all of this information, understanding how even inside of ourselves. This battle is fought and has to be won. And if you're part of Israel, the 144,000 especially that make themselves ready, you have to overcome by the blood of the Lamb, but by the word. What's the word of the testimony? Read Deuteronomy. It doesn't change. It's the covenant. It's Sinai. It's the 10 commandments. Now, what's next so important in understanding of this whole story is you read Deuteronomy, the progression, why when you get into 34, after you've read it, there is more to the lifestyle of the elect of Israel than just the 10 commandments. And that is where the wisdom that gets applied. This is what I mean. The Torah wisdom of our sages on the halakha is what the Talmud is. This is why the writings in the house are so valuable, invaluable, and priceless. Why they have parshed out and have understood, always keeping the standard, understanding the Hebrew, having the total storyline and context and who's who, all the bloodlines, what's really, and able to encrypt it and code it so that to most generations and most people, it goes right over their head. It's quite a remarkable thing. But when you understand, and like he just said, there's so much. So I just read starting at 32 to the very end, these chapters. Well, start with 30 through 34, which is the last chapter. I just want to say, for this is no vain word for you. It is your life. This is, and I said the word of the testimony. This is no vain thing. It's not just a bunch of little kid, I know they try to denigrate everything. Oh, the 10 commandments, that's just, so basic. Well, yeah, okay. This is no vain thing, no vain word to you, for it is your life. And because of this word, you shall live long upon the land into which you go over the Jordan to inherit. See, again, you have to understand the two archetypes of Egypt and Babylon. We're trying to conquer two big enemies. An enemy of our soul and an enemy of our bodies. All right. And Babylon is more the enemy that's in our soul, the psychological lies and warfare that comes against the God of Israel. In our bodies, obviously, the sicknesses, the diseases, the ultimate death that happens to us, okay? Because we're unconnected. So part of this standing up, affirming the covenant by Ephraim, Judah really relaxing its grip. I mean, they can breathe now. In my opinion, Judah can relax its grip and breathe. And there are Torah sages now in Ephraim, like in the sons of Issachar, these whole archetypes of some of the great houses of Torah scholarship. They are in the land, and it's an exciting new time. And I hope, and I'm believing for 2021, for me personally, and for just a lot of people who are deeply along in this understanding, to go to whole new levels of dialogue and of power and of unity and synergy. It's going to be very exciting. Wow, yeah, the world is going to go, quote unquote, go up in flames, right? But on that note, today is the day. Let us rejoice in it, for the Father has made it, and the future is as bright as the promises of Elohim. So I encourage you to listen to this video, but especially, and then go back and listen to my one last week, the Standing Up Part 1, and then I have written a blog that to me just encapsulates and summarizes where we are and where we're going. And hey, I didn't write the book, but you just can't beat it. It's still the best story ever written. So shalom, shalom. I will see you in the next video.